Brandon, what are you sitting up here for? All right, good morning. All right, we're going to continue on with our Mr. Coffee today. And we had started and built some of the properties that we thought our Mr. Coffee should have. And we created two methods yesterday. And instead of making it just an attr-accessor or a getter and a setter, what we did was we named these something that was more useful to the outside world. We got to think of the user of my Mr. Coffee class. So you got to think of the other developers that are using this class. So we wanted to be able to take our Mr. Coffee and turn it on. Turning it on was an action that we applied to the object, my coffee, which was my coffee class, my machine. So we like to think of these methods as actions that apply some change to the Mr. Coffee class, some change to the class that we're dealing with. So we try to write those as actions, all right? And you'll see that very prevalently when we move to Rails. These end up being a lot of actions that operate on the various models and things that we have, our database tables in Rails. All right, so let's continue on. Let's build our water level. How do we interact with our coffee class in the outside world and change this property? All right, so what kind of an action would you do to change the water level in your Mr. Coffee? Add water, right? Good. So that's a good method. So we'll create a method called add water. And since we're adding something, we need to know how much we're going to add. So what would we pass into this method, or would we? All right, get a variable. So let's add some number of what? Well, we're storing ounces, so let's pass in a variable called ounces. And how do we take that variable and change our water level based on that? All right, good. So we're going to say add water level. Are we going to just assign ounces? Why? We want to add it to what's already there, right? We don't want to just say, I'm going to add 6 ounces and replace what was there, because there might be 6 ounces already in the Mr. Coffee machine, right? And I want to add more water to it. I don't want to. Water doesn't replace each other. It sums up, right? It adds up, and we get more and more water. So I'm going to make this a plus equals. To do why? Right. Good. So if I just allow them to keep adding water to this, what happens in the real world if I keep adding water to my Mr. Coffee machine? What happens? It overflows, right? There is some point where the water comes up to the edge, and if I keep pouring in water into it, it's going to flow over the top. But there is still some maximum that stays there, right? So whether or not they add more water, the most I can take is what? My max water level, which I stored as a class variable, right? So I need to compare this at some point, and I like to call it pegging a variable. That means if you're driving really fast in the old speedometers, when you hit 100, there was actually a little peg there, and you couldn't go any faster. The car might have thought you were going faster, but the speedometer said, I can't go any faster. That's as far as I go, right? So I call that pegging a variable, meaning I want it to stop at some point. So how would I peg this variable? Okay. Since our water is virtual water, we don't care if it runs on the ground a little bit, right? I mean, we could make it a little more complicated, but typically what I do in cases like this is if they add too much water, I'm going to stop the water level at a certain level. I'm only going to allow so much water to come into my cup, right? So pegging it, I would say I'm going to check, is my water level greater than my max water level. Good. If it is, then I want to peg it. I want to set that to not go over. So pegging it means to force my water level to be equal to my max water level. All right, that pegs the system. So if I come in and my water level was 30 already, and I added 8 ounces, that would make this 40, right? My water level is now 40. My max water level is 32, so I'm going to say, is 40 greater than 32? Yes, 40 is greater than 32. So I'm going to set my water level to 32 and let the rest of the ounces fall on the floor. My virtual water just disappears. All right? That's a quick way to get around that problem. All right, so let's play with our add water method now that we've created it in our class. I have my coffee, and I can change that and say, let's add some water, and let's add 20 ounces. All right, and then let's print out the inspection of my class and see what I got. So here we go. My water level should be 20.0 ounces. All right, good. So let's add some more. Let's add some more water. And let's add 10 more ounces and inspect it. And now I've got 30 ounces. All right, good. So let's add another 10. Let's add a decimal amount. All right. Let's add 10.9 ounces and see what happens. Well, it pegs it. The rest of my 8.9 ounces fell on the floor, right? My virtual water disappeared. So my water level is at its max. I can't take any more. If you keep adding water to me, I'm not going to do anything with it. It just stays what I call pegged. That variable is pegged. Okay, any questions on that? Isn't that cool? See how simple that is? That water level could be very similar to a current position in your DVD. Right? Hint, hint. Hint, big hint. Your position is just a variable that keeps getting added to if you're playing or you're fast forwarding. And if you hit your maximum play length, it's going to peg it. I can't go any farther than that, right? I can only do 120 minutes. I can't go any farther than that. So big hint there. All right, so would it be useful for the outside user of my class to see how much water is already in the Mr. Coffee machine? If you remember my physical example yesterday, it had a little gauge on the side, and I could see the water. I could see the water through the little transparent piece of plastic. I could see how much water was there. So it'd be nice to query my coffee class and see how much is there. So how do I do that? With a reader, right? I need to get that or expose this water level variable to the outside world. So I can just add it up here. I can just say, I want to add my water level to my reader, and that will create, is it a getter or a setter? That's a getter, okay? So that will automatically create a getter. So I can, at this point, let's just say puts my coffee dot water level. All right, let's run that. And at that point in time, before I added my last piece of water, I had 30 ounces in my coffee machine. Right. If your outside program then might not allow more water in, things like that. But this is safeguarding the user from messing up my Mr. Coffee machine here. All right. Any questions on that? Adding a getter. Now, I don't do that. I don't just automatically allow everything to be read or written to, because for instance, do I want them to change the element temperature? Well, the new Keurig machines do that. You can actually program it to be anywhere from 188 to 192 degrees. But in this case, my Mr. Coffee had nothing I could do with that. So that's something I would never allow the outside world of my class to change. But it might be useful for them to read it. I don't know. It might not even be useful to read in some cases. Some variables might be useful only for calculating things inside the class, and they're hidden completely from the outside world. That's where we talk about encapsulation. It's only allowing things to be viewed or changed that are necessary, and keep everything else hidden. And even the power, remember the power? They don't know, the outside world should not know or care that I'm storing power as a Boolean. All they know is they can turn it on, they can turn it off, and they can check to see if it's on or off. How I store that internally is completely separate than the implementation. This is the implementation of my class here, the use of my class. So everybody understand that? Any questions on that? Now's your chance to get questions in there. All right. So we've done our water level. We could do coffee level the same way. Do we have a maximum that our coffee can take? Remember, this was our dry ounces of coffee. So there should be, right? So let's put a maximum coffee. This is dry coffee. That would be a lot of coffee, 2 pounds of coffee. Yeah, so this is the dried coffee. So I don't know, you might have 8 ounces, right? Maybe 8 ounces. That'd be a lot, even still, half a pound of coffee. All right, you could brew some serious espresso that way, right? That'd be good. All right, let's make it 4 ounces. All right, 1/4 pound of coffee. All right, so we need to do the same thing. We might want to check our coffee level. We want to be able to see that. So I'm going to add a reader, a getter, for my coffee level. So that allows my class to have this method called coffee level, and that will return the current state of my class, the current value stored in this variable. And then I need another add coffee method. So it's almost identical to this. And we'll say add coffee. We're going to add ounces. This is going to be my coffee level. And so these are, just replace these variables with my coffee level. And this is going to be max coffee level. All right, so there's a nice little method, easy to do. It's pegging, again, based on a different variable. So the most coffee I can put into this is what? 4 ounces. The rest of my virtual coffee is going to spill on the floor, right? So I'm going to add some coffee. Let's test it. My coffee.add some coffee. And let's add a pound of coffee. And then we'll inspect our coffee maker. All right, so we added a pound of coffee, and the coffee level only has 4 ounces in it. Why is that? That's the max, right? I pegged my coffee at 4 ounces here. So this pegging line here let the rest of the coffee spill on the floor. My virtual coffee disappeared. Pardon me? A lot of waste there, right? That's good. That's funny. They should know better than to add more coffee than I can take. Yeah. All right, any questions on the add coffee? Very similar to the add water. Well, you're going to add time. You're going to subtract time. That's fast forwarding and reversing. You're going to have a play, which is going to add time to your. So there's going to be more logic in here than this.
Can you use predefined methods in classes?
Like what?
If you made some methods above the class that make things
No.
beautiful code, just
No, you're saying, can I create a method out here and have it available in my Mr. Coffee class? That's a bad programming practice because you're, although I can use some built-in Ruby code, I could write a method that would be available here, but typically we want our methods that deal with our coffee machine inside of our coffee machine. We want it inside the class, so that when we move this class around, its methods go with it. You know, it's all part of that class. All right, so let's do something a little more complicated. Let's brew some coffee. All right, let's brew some coffee. So we need a method, and what do we want to call our method? Brew. Okay, let's finally brew some coffee. So we'll call it brew. It's an action. We don't need any parameters. We're just going to tell our coffee maker to brew something, right? So let's start by, there's a lot of things we can do in our brew class, our brew method. First thing is, we can't brew anything unless what is happening? Right, we've got to have three things involved. We've got to have the power on, we've got to have water in our basin, and we've got to have coffee in our coffee pot, in our filter, right? And we didn't have and we need to have a filter too. We didn't add a filter. So we need a method to turn our filter on, add our filter. So let's add a method def add filter. Doesn't need a parameter because you can only add one, right? But this is an action. Rather than just saying set my filter to be true, I want to tell my class an action and let it decide what to do with that. So what would I do if I add a filter? What am I changing? Right, I'm just changing my filter to be true. All right, that's all I need to do. It now is true. I could add another method, remove filter, if I wanted to, and obviously it would just say filter equals false. All right, so two new methods that let me change the status. And again, it's not just a standard getter and a setter, because I don't want the outside world to know even that I'm storing this as a Boolean. They don't care. I just want to be able to change something in my properties here. So in my brew class, I need three things to happen. It must be on, have water, and have a filter, four things, and have a coffee grounds, right? Dry coffee. So how do I check that all of that is the case? Logic, right? I've added some logic here. All right, so I could say if. How do I know if it's on? Power. And power is a Boolean. So if I just say if power, what's that going to result in? Just by itself, just saying if power, already power is a true or false, you can replace that. If true or if false. I don't have to say, all right, very few people actually do this in a Boolean. That's redundant. It's a redundant thing, right? If power is the same thing as if power equal true. So I'm just going to say, is the power on? And, how do I do ands? Ampersands. And I have water. So having water means what? Well, that's a good question. Right? Okay, because we don't care how strong they make their coffee, but it's just as long as they have some coffee. I mean water. So I want to check that my water level is greater than 0.0 since it's a float. And having a filter. So my filter is true or false, so I can just say filter. And my last thing has some coffee grounds, so my coffee level has got to be greater than 0.0 as well. That's true. But we have an intelligent coffee machine, so it knows if there's coffee in there, it's going to protect the user from itself. So if all of that is true, then I want to brew the coffee. So what does that mean to brew my coffee? Right? Right. So let's take away some water, and we can be arbitrary and creative here. Let's take away some water. I'm going to remove some water from my water level. Subtract, let's say it only brews 8 ounces at a time. Okay, so I'm going to remove 8.0 ounces.
8 ounces instantly? That's amazing.
Yeah. Why? To remove an ounce at a time? Why would I do that? No. My coffee maker is instant.
It's magic.
All right, so I'm going to remove 8 ounces. And we'll see. I'll leave this in here.
You need to peg this, because what if it goes below 0?
Very good. Very good. I was going to leave that and see what you guys found that. We'll peg it. We'll peg it in a minute. So one thing as I develop, I say I need to remember to come back and do something here. So RubyMine, along with PHP Storm and everything else, lets me add these things called to-dos. Notice how it turned blue? And I can say peg this variable to 0. Say I've got to go out and do something. I can remind myself where I was. Now, what's nice is it keeps track of all the to-dos in my project. So if I click this to-do button down here, it shows me, oh, I've got a to-do left here. I can click on it, takes me right to that line, I can write that code, and it just keeps track of it. And when you have code that's 20 or 30,000 lines, to try to remember where you were, that's just impossible. So this is just a really handy. I love this. I always have used to-dos, but then what you do is you search through all your files for to-do, and this already does it for you, so I don't have to worry about it. So we'll remove some water. I need to, do I actually remove the coffee? Well, it stays there, but the coffee is used, and we don't want to use it again, so let's just say that we'll remove the coffee at the same time. All right? So let's remove some coffee level. Let's remove 2 ounces, all right? So we need to peg this one too. All right, and notice how I've got now 2 to-dos. Isn't that just sweet? Very useful. All right, so I got coffee level. What else changes in my state of my machine? My filter is bad. No. Let's just remove the. Let's remove the filter. Now I have a method in here called remove filter, so I can use this, and this is where introducing a new concept here. In C# you call it this, I think, right?
Yeah, you said it was self.
Here we're a self. I know we're self here. JavaScript uses this. The idea of this and self is to refer back to the object that I'm in, the object that I'm manipulating at the current point in time. And in this case, the this responds to whatever this coffee instance, the object of my Mr. Coffee class, whatever that is, the stuff before the period. When I'm in that method, that is the object that I'm dealing with. So I'm going to call the method, I might as well call remove filter and use one of my methods that are already here, and that will turn my filter to false. Let's say I've got these advanced filters and they just dissolve up with the coffee, right? They're gone. So creamer. So now what happens to the rest of my machine? What else do I have up here?
There's one other thing.
So many things.
Right, I need to change my brewed coffee level. That's going to increase by some number. And so I'm going to change that. I'm going to say my brewed coffee level is going to increase by what? 95%, because we might lose some of the ounces. Wow, you guys are really making this difficult. So it's going to be, I'm going to leave it as whatever the water level is. And we took 8 ounces away from our water level, so our coffee should increase by 8 ounces, right?
In this virtual world,
Right, now I've got 3 to-dos here. All right, so anything else I need to change?
We need to make a brewed coffee.
brewing false. We got the bottom there.
Getter for brewed coffee. We should probably wait.
Okay, we never changed it to true. I mean, we could do this if we're brewing. I mean, this is if something took a long time, I could set my brewing to be true. And then when I'm done brewing, which is just at the bottom, this is going to happen so fast that it doesn't matter. But there are cases where I might be doing a lot of coding in here, and somebody else is trying to access my coffee machine, and you can't do anything if it's brewing, that kind of thing. So that would be very similar to a playing variable. Is my disk playing? If it's playing and I hit play, what's going to happen? No. What happens in a DVD player if I hit play twice? Depends on the player, but typically nothing, right? I hit play, it doesn't do anything else. It's just there. So if I'm already playing, I don't want to do anything else. I just want to return. Right, it doesn't change anything. But I also might not want to change or set any time. If I'm playing and they hit play, I might want to just return from my method. Right? I don't want to start changing timing variables and other stuff like that. So that's a good hint again.
That makes it simpler. I was going to put pause in there.
All right, so we turn it off. Now what happens in the else condition if they turn the brewing on? Nothing. The machine just sits there, dumb. But we might have a little smarter coffee maker, and we might want to return some status to the user that the machine is, we want to tell them that there's no filter. We want to tell them that there's no power. We want to, I mean, that's a really smart machine if it can do something with no power on, but forget that. Our virtual machine is really smart. So we need to, if something has happened, we need to return something, and we need to think about how the outside world is going to use this method. So what do we want to do? We could return a string saying, you're an idiot, you got to add coffee first, or we could just return false, saying that I can't brew, I'm not going to brew, right? So how do you think the outside world is going to use this information? It might be useful to return a string that says something like the status of my coffee. Can't brew right now. Missing stuff, right? And then you might return the water. I could return the coffee level. Right, and I'm going to put some more stuff like my water level is that let's make it nice then. My coffee level is that, and what else do I care? Filter. I know that's a weird one. my filter is going to be filter, and my power is going to be power.
You got extra.
Oops. All right, so I'm going to return this string, if that's the case. And otherwise, I'm going to return, if it actually did something, I might return a different string. Your coffee is ready. Right? So, all my brew, my coffee dot brew. And what's going to happen when I call this? All right, I ran it. What did I get back? Nothing. Why did I get nothing back? Okay, partially. What does brew return? It does. Whoa. So this is a really common error. Remember, I cannot put it inside classes. So I'm returning. So what is this variable? Okay, I have to print it out. I have to save it in a variable. I have to do something with that string, or it just gets thrown in the bit bucket, right? So I'm just going to print it out for now. And can't now missing some stuff, and I've got my water level, my coffee level. I don't have a filter, and my power's off, which is kind of funny, right? So let's turn our coffee machine on. Let's add a filter. Add filter, and I think that was all I needed. Let's make my report a little nicer. Missing some stuff. I'll put a carriage return here. My coffee level. I like this to be separated a little bit. And let's put a carriage return at the end. All right, so now I turned on my coffee machine. I added a filter. I already had coffee up here, which is interesting that I can add coffee when a filter's not there. Right? That would seem to be a bug to me. So in my add filter, that reminds me, maybe I should do something up here. I would probably do it in my add coffee, right? I want to say, make sure there is a filter first. All right, now I've got some more to-dos to do. Isn't that great? So let's run it now, see if I can actually brew some coffee. Can't brew, missing some stuff. Ah, very good. So I changed it, but I didn't call my brew method again. So I'm going to call that a second time. All right, your coffee is ready. Isn't that cool? Isn't that sweet? So, boy, how do I keep doing that? That is weird. I think that's a center button, center scroll wheel click goes to the internal Ruby method inspect, which is in this object.rb. That's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, it would change your Ruby, absolutely, because Ruby is interpreted. All right, any questions on what we have so far? I did. Did you notice that? Yeah. I'm going to leave that one to you guys. I did a little bit yesterday in IRB showing you how you could convert and do some time stuff. So that's going to require some thinking on your part. So let's fix some of my to-dos here. In the case of the water level, notice how, first of all, this is bad programming to have constants built into your code like this. So instead of having it as an 8.0, because notice I've done it twice now, right? So what would be a better way of keeping track of this data? A variable, all right? So let's add a variable. Maybe it's a class variable because it's going to be a production kind of a thing. And I'm going to say, what am I going to call that? It's going to be how much ounces a cup of coffee makes, right? A standard cup. We'll call it standard cup. How about that? And this is going to be 8 ounces. Amount of water used to brew coffee. All right, so now I have one place in my code where I can change this 8.0. It's at the top in a class variable, and that's then every time I produce a Mr. Coffee object, it's going to produce the same amount of coffee. So down here, I'm going to use, instead of 8.0, I'm going to use my class variable. And same here. All right? Any questions on that? So this is what I call, or what everybody calls, refactoring my code. Once I have my code working, I want to make this better. I want to remove some redundant code, make it drier. Remember, what does dry mean? Don't repeat yourself, right? So there might be other places where I might be reducing my water level. So this could be turned into a method. And inside of that method, I could do the pegging inside that method, so I don't have to keep doing that. So just like I have an add water method, I might have a remove water method. So let's call this remove water. And we're going to remove amount of water, and instead of adding it, we're going to do what? Subtracting it. Now, if it goes negative, I can't take out more water than I have. So pegging it in the opposite direction is that I can't go below 0, right? So I've already subtracted my water. Well, this is removing water from the water tank. I don't know. Maybe you don't want them to use that method. We'll talk about that later. That's a different issue. But if we're only going to ever remove 8 ounces, then I wouldn't pass this in. But there might be a case where the outside world wants to take out some water because they're going on vacation or something, so they want to empty their water thing. Okay, I don't know. So I might leave that as ounces and let that be variable, and we'll show how to call that in a second then. So in my water level, I want to check to see, have I gone negative? Have I gone below 0, right? So in this case, this is going to change to below 0. All right, have my water become negative. If it has, then what do I want to set my water level to be? 0. All right, so I'm pegging my water level, pegging at 0. Okay, so now when I call that down here in my brewing, instead of subtracting this now, I want to call my method. We're going to call it self.remove water, and we're going to pass in my standard cup. All right, and that replaces this whole line of code, so I can remove that. And now my code is a little better. It's using some variables at the top. I'm reusing a method that could be utilized by the outside world as well. I doed my remove filter already. I doed that. My coffee level, I might have the same thing. Yes, Brandon.
You have to do the self part of it? Because
You don't. If it's a method internally, I'm just wanted to introduce this. This actually ends up being the same thing here.
Okay.
In this case, these methods are available inside of this class. So let's make sure that that's the case. Well, I'm calling a method. It's already assumed that I'm inside of that object. Okay, so it knows that I'm calling the method on this particular object.
Because you assign the object to a variable, and then you're calling the variable with.
Right. So this is the object that this method is that it is acting on. So it's already acting on the same thing. All right. So my brew still works. I just wanted to introduce the concept of self. Sometimes you need to have that. Sometimes you don't.
Okay.
We'll get to that later. So, all right.
Cool.
Any other questions on that?
I have a formatting question.
Yes.
I have a tendency to indent between the word true and word false, or turn on and off. Would that be wrong?
Yes. Here, you mean?
I would do it anyway.
Here?
So before you turn it in, do Control A and then read.
Yeah. That's wrong. It might look good to you here, but it's wrong because this is operating at the same level as this one. There's no real logic changing here. We indent for logic purposes, not for anything else. So if you want to do something, I don't know, you could put a comment in here or something like that to make this stand out. Not brewing. But it's wrong. Yeah, I would use white space. I don't typically do this. I would just do this, like this. That separates it out. That's kind of a separate separation of my code. Maybe do this instead. That's subjective. But indenting it, at least for me, would be wrong. If you want to do it when you're coding out there in the world, everybody else will think it's wrong as well, but that's up to you, right? So it introduces a false sense that I've changed scope if I indent things like that. It changes. Okay? Good question. Any other questions?
Why is this so fun?
This is great. Isn't this great fun? Trying to simulate a real-world object in code?
I think you took
That's pretty cool.
Think so? I don't think so. No.
Oh no.
Tell me. All right, so I still have some to-dos. Notice that when I deleted that to-do, it took it off my list. So once I'm done with doing that code, I'm going to remove this. Like let's remove this one, and it takes it off the list. So that's a way that I can go back to code and say, I don't want to forget to do this later. I know I have to do this. I want to go make sure I do this later. All right, any other questions on this? I think we've beat the Mr. Coffee to death other than time, and I leave that to you guys. In the outside world, then I could add menus. I could add some menus to this and say, number one, add some water to my filter, things like that. And I'm just going to call these methods. Just remember that you have to create an object from your class before you can do anything with it. Okay? Any questions? All right.